A rich couple bullied a waitress, not knowing who was watching. This quiet man didn't yell or fight. He used their own secrets as a weapon. What followed was a collapse more devastating than any punch. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. I believe the lady asked you to move your car. The voice was calm, low, and it sliced through the diner's greasy air like a scalpel. Every head in mixed griddle turned. The nasty preview, the woman's shriek, the shocking slam of a palm on formica was over. Now the main event had found its quiet, terrifying conductor. At the center of the storm were David and Jessica St. Clair. He had a cashmere sweater draped over his shoulders like a cape. She had a diamond on her finger that could signal ships and a sneer that could sour cream. Between them and the trembling waitress, Elena, whose wrist bore the red imprint of Jessica's grip, stood a man who seemed, at first glance, utterly ordinary. Daniel Ledger. To the regulars, he was just Ledger. The quiet man in booth 4, black coffee, Denver omelet extra crispy, spreadsheets on a tablet. He wore dark jeans and a worn leather jacket that smelled of open road and engine oil, not boardrooms. His face was all quiet intensity, his eyes a storm gray that missed nothing. By day, a senior accountant at the prestigious firm of Aldrin and Stern. By other definitions, the secret financial architect for the Iron Serpent's MC, the man who wove their legitimate earnings into a tapestry of impeccable, untouchable investments. The St. Clairs, loud and dripping with nouveau-rich arrogance, were Aldrin and Stern's newest prize clients. Ledger had been handed their file just that morning. David St. Clair's eyes flicked over Ledger with dismissive contempt. "This is a private matter. The help was incompetent. My Ferrari requires a specific amount of ambient space. It's a matter of physics, not parking." Elena, her voice a wobbly thread, tried again. "The spot is for compacts only, sir. The tow truck's already called. I was just trying to warn you." "You were trying to embarrass us," Jessica hissed, her manicured fingers still pointing accusingly at the mark she'd left on Elena's skin. The memory of her slamming the waitress's hand onto the table hung in the air, a violation. "You will go out there, you will send that truck away, and you will pay his call-out fee from your tips." Ledger didn't even glance at the St. Clairs. He moved past David as if he were missed, his entire focus on Elena. He gently took her unharmed arm. His touch was startlingly warm, a stark contrast to the cold shock locking her joints. "Come on," he murmured, the word meant only for her. "You're okay, sit right here." He guided her to his vacated booth, easing her into the cracked vinyl. He placed the napkin dispenser in front of her, a silly, solid thing to anchor to. Then he turned. The shift was cinematic, profound. The quiet accountant vanished. In his place stood something else, a predator in stillness. It was in the deliberate roll of his shoulders, the way the diner's fluorescent light seemed to harden the planes of his face. "You put your hands on her," Ledger stated. It wasn't a question, it was a verdict. David swelled, a pufferfish in polo shirt. "We were resolving a dispute. Now, unless you want your name on a report to your managing partners, I suggest you sit back down and finish your budget analysis." He spat the last words. A ghost of a smile touched Ledger's lips. It was cold, and it never reached his eyes. "My firm, right." He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, a few swift taps, and he accessed the diner's ancient Wi-Fi. The small, dust-smeared TV behind the counter, usually playing silent highlights of games no one watched, flickered to life, mirroring his screen. "What is this? A tantrum with slides?" Jessica's laugh was like breaking glass. "We don't have time for your pathetic little power play." "This won't take 5 minutes," Ledger said, his voice now projecting clean and clinical to the rapt audience. Mick the cook leaned on the pass-through, arms crossed. A grizzled trucker at the counter paused, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. The air grew thick, charged. David and Jessica St. Clair Capital Partners, recently closed a $60 million venture fund II, press releases in every tech digest. Very impressive. David smirked, misreading the room entirely. "Public information. Get to your point before I get to my lawyer." "The point," Ledger said, tapping his screen, "is right here." A labyrinthine corporate structure chart bloomed on the TV, a spiderweb of interconnected LLCs with opaque brand names. St. Clair Capital is the shiny storefront, But the assets, the real holdings, they're tucked away in Marlowe Holdings, Viridian Trust, Pandora's Box LLC. I appreciate the dramatic flair. He zoomed in. All registered in Delaware, the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands. All with the same 2 signing officers. He looked up, his gray eyes boring into David's. Your personal chef and your astrologer, creative board appointments. Jessica's sneer faltered. That's sophisticated estate planning. You're a diner rat you wouldn't comprehend. I comprehend Schedule C, Jessica. I comprehend Form 8300. Another tap. A cascade of bank statements, key numbers glaringly unredacted, flowed across the screen. I comprehend that the $200,000 that flowed from Pandora's Box to your personal account last quarter, the quarter you bought that Ferrari currently about to have its wheels lifted, was logged as a consultancy fee. A fee to offset the catastrophic losses in Viridian Trust. Losses paid to a shell construction company in Belize for a resort that, he swiped, and a satellite image appeared. A lush, untouched stretch of coastline. Doesn't have a single footprint. Nice beach, though. David's face had gone from flushed to ashen. This is illegal. You're hacking private systems. Mick, call the police. Mick, wiping a glass with a slow, deliberate motion, shrugged. He's on the guest Wi-Fi, pal. Passwords on the menu. You want a refill or not? Ledger's fingers danced across the screen. The suspense was a living thing, coiling around the stale smell of grease and coffee. This wasn't a bar fight, it was a surgical strike. But the real masterpiece, Ledger mused, his tone almost admiring, is the fund itself. The $60 million, a lot from municipal pension funds, right? Teachers, firefighters. You promised them safe, growth-oriented tech investments. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in for the watching diners, the trucker, the family in the corner, the elderly couple. Then he locked eyes with David, and his voice dropped deadly quiet. But $18.3 million of it was funneled, through a series of licensing agreements, into a private equity firm you control in Cyprus, which then invested in a series of failed crypto startups that you just happened to be advisors for. The fees you collected were astronomical. The losses passed on to the pensioners. A choked sound escaped Jessica. The diamond on her hand seemed to flash like a distress signal. You're bluffing, David whispered, but the sweat on his temple betrayed him. I never bluff, it's bad accounting. Ledger's thumb hovered over the screen. The SEC has a whistleblower portal. The IRS has a special division for fraud of this scale. All it takes is one upload. With a carbon copy to you, of course, professional courtesy. You can't, Jessica shrieked, her composure shattering. We'll ruin you, we'll own your firm, we'll have you arrested. My firm has a strict ethics clause, Ledger said calmly. Client malfeasance must be reported immediately. As of now, you are no longer clients. He tapped the screen. A soft whoosh sound echoed in the silent diner. Sent. The effect was instantaneous and visceral. David's phone buzzed on the table, a violent, rattling dance. Then Jessica's, then again, and again. David snatched his up, his face illuminated by the ghastly blue light. His eyes scanned an email, then widened in sheer horror. It's from the SEC, acknowledging receipt of a comprehensive complaint and launching an immediate, full-scale investigation, all assets frozen pending. His voice failed him. Jessica was staring at her own screen, tears of rage and terror mixing with her mascara. My father, he's calling. The border, oh God. The empire, built on lies and bullies' leverage, crumbled in real time, right there amid the smell of fried onions and maple syrup. Ledger didn't watch the collapse. He turned back to Alina, who was staring at him, her mouth slightly open, a universe of confusion and dawning awe in her eyes. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a simple, elegant business card. He placed it on the table in front of her, next to the napkin dispenser. Alina, he said, her name sounding different on his lips, softer, worthy. Aldrin & Stern has an opening for a junior compliance officer. It involves a keen eye for detail, a strong sense of right and wrong, and the courage to call out bullies. He allowed a real smile, small but genuine, to touch his eyes. The starting salary is triple what you make here, with full benefits. The interview would be a formality. My card, think about it. He didn't wait for her answer. He threw a $50 bill on the counter for his uneaten omelette, nodded once to Mick, and walked towards the door. The diner was tomb silent, save for the choked sobs of Jessica St. Clair and the frantic, whispered curses of her husband. As Ledger pushed the diner door open, the bell jingling a ridiculously cheerful tune, the tow truck's winch outside began to whir, a metallic song of comeuppance. The cold night air hit Ledger's face, a welcome cleanse. He breathed deep, the scent of the city a mix of rain on asphalt and distant exhaust. The dramatic diner scene was already receding in his mind, filed away as a necessary piece of business. He crossed the street to where his motorcycle sat, a heavy, matte black machine, all clean lines and restrained power. It was no Ferrari, it was better. He was about to swing a leg over when a voice, breathless and determined, called out behind him. "Waiter!" He turned. Elena stood under the diner's flickering neon sign, her apron gone, her jacket clutched in her hands. The brave vulnerability in her face, illuminated in red and blue light, struck him right in the chest. You just destroyed two of the most powerful people in this city over a $10 tip and a bruised wrist," she said, her voice stronger now, laced with incredulity. "They weren't powerful," Ledger corrected gently, leaning against his bike. "They were loud. There's a difference, and it wasn't about the tip." Then what was it about? He considered her, this woman who had taken abuse and hadn't broken. "Balance," he said finally. The scales were tipped. She took a step closer, the charged space between them crackling. The comedy of the situation, a billionaire's Ferrari being hooked up just feet away, the wail of its alarm like a dying animal, was not lost on either of them. A small, disbelieving laugh escaped her lips. "You're offering me a job in compliance. I don't even know what that really means." "It means being the conscience," he said. "It means looking at the books and seeing the story they tell, not just the numbers. You stood up to them when you had everything to lose. That's the only qualification that matters." She hugged herself against the chill, her eyes searching his. "Who are you really? Because no accountant I've ever met does that." He smiled, a faint, mysterious thing. "I'm a man who balances books. Some are just more interesting than others." He handed her the spare helmet hanging from his handlebar, a silent question. Elena looked at the helmet, then back at the diner, then at him. The suspense of the choice hung in the air. This was a crossroads, far more terrifying than facing the St. Clairs. This was the unknown. With a resolve that made Ledger's respect for her deepen, she took the helmet. "The interview, is it now?" "The first part of it, yes." He started the bike. The engine growled to life, a deep, visceral thrum that vibrated through the pavement and up through their bones. It wasn't the sound of money. It was the sound of freedom, of power held in check. He climbed on, and she, after a second's hesitation, swung on behind him. She instinctively wrapped her arms around his waist, her body pressing against the warm leather of his back. The contact was electric, an 18+ charge contained within the simple act of holding on. It was safety and danger all at once. He didn't take her to a sleek office tower. He drove through the neon-washed arteries of the city, moving into the industrial edges where the warehouses loomed like sleeping giants. The journey was a silent communion, her trust a palpable weight against him. They stopped in front of a nondescript warehouse, its only marking a subtle, stylized serpent emblem welded near the door. He keyed a code, and a heavy roll-up door clattered open, revealing not a den of iniquity, but a stunning, minimalist space. Exposed brick, polished concrete floors, a wall of monitors showing financial news feeds and market data from Tokyo to London. A massive, live-edge oak desk held 3 computer monitors. It looked more like the headquarters of a cutting-edge tech firm than a clubhouse. A man emerged from a side door big, with a beard shot through with gray and intelligent eyes. He wore a leather vest over a simple Henley. This was Marcus, the club's president. "Ledger," Marcus nodded, his eyes flicking to Elena with curiosity but not surprise. "Heard you made some noise at Mix." "Tidying up a mess," Ledger said, dismounting and helping Elena off. Her legs were a little wobbly. "Marcus, this is Elena, a potential candidate for our compliance division." Marcus walked over, his size intimidating, but his smile was warm. He extended a hand that could crush cinder blocks, but his grip was carefully gentle. "Elena, Any enemy of arrogant pricks is a friend of ours. Welcome. Our compliance division, Elena asked, looking around the pristine space, hearing the distant, friendly rumble of motorcycles in a secured garage below. We own several legitimate businesses, Ledger explained, leading her to the desk. A construction company, a chain of auto shops, a microbrewery, all above board, profitable. My job is to make sure they stay that way and that our family's financial health is secure. He gestured to the screens. This is the real empire, not shells and fraud, concrete, steel, sweat, and good beer. The comedic contrast hit Elena fully now. She'd expected a dark bar, not a Wall Street war room run by men in leather. She laughed, a real relieved sound. So the biker gang is a bunch of accountants. Marcus chuckled, a low rumble. Honey, we are successful accountants who ride motorcycles and occasionally remind people that the world needs a little equilibrium. He winked. The intimidation factor saves on legal fees. Ledger pulled up a chair for Elena. Your first lesson, this, he said, pointing to a complex spreadsheet on the center screen, is the quarterly report for Serpent Construction. Their concrete margins are off by 2%. Find out why. It was a test, a leap of faith. Elena looked at the numbers, then at Ledger's steady gaze, then at Marcus's encouraging nod. She took a deep breath and sat down. For an hour she worked, asking sharp questions, her waitress's eye for detail translating perfectly to spotting inconsistencies in material invoices. Ledger watched her, a silent pride swelling in him. She was a natural. Later, after Marcus had left them with a promise of a proper welcome, Ledger showed her to a small, sleek apartment above the warehouse, safe, secure, furnished. For tonight, no strings, just safety. The tension between them in the quiet of the apartment was a thick, sweet thing. They stood close in the kitchenette, the city lights twinkling far below through the large windows. You trust me with all this, she whispered, her eyes wide, after just one day. I saw your heart today, Elena, he said, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely showed. He reached out, his thumb gently tracing the fading red mark on her wrist. The touch was a brand, a promise. That's a rarer currency than all the money in all their offshore accounts. His hand cupped her cheek, his gaze dropping to her lips, the chemistry between them a live wire. It was charged, intense, deeply romantic in its unspoken understanding, a meeting of two souls who understood justice. He leaned in and her breath hitched, but he stopped a breath away, his forehead resting against hers. The restraint was more potent than any kiss. The job is yours if you want it, the rest we take slow. The next morning, the financial world was quaking. News breaks detailed the spectacular, rapid unraveling of St. Clair Capital. The SEC had moved with unprecedented speed. Assets were frozen, properties seized. It was the scandal of the season. At Aldrin and Stern, Ledger sat in a meeting with the stunned senior partners. A terrible business, the managing partner sighed, wiping his brow. Thank God you uncovered it, Daniel. Our reputation is saved. It's almost a miracle you had that data on hand. Thorough due diligence, Ledger said, his face a mask of professional solemnity. I had a feeling. As he left the glass tower, his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, new prospect. A shipping magnate with ties to the old Bratva wants to move dirty money through our clean channels. Offer is substantial. Ledger typed back, his fingers steady, politely decline. Our empire is built on clean stone. We don't trade in mud. He put his phone away. The Iron Serpent's empire would not waver. It was legal, strong, and now it had a new fierce guardian of its conscience. He rode to the warehouse, where Elena, dressed in new, confident clothes, was already at the desk, frowning at a shipping manifest for the microbrewery. She looked up as he entered, and the smile she gave him was worth more than any Ledger entry. It was the smile of someone who had been seen, rescued, and given a sword to wield. The story wasn't about a downfall, it was about a rise. Theirs. Together, in the gray spaces where justice wasn't just a concept, but a practice, built one honest dollar, one protected wrist at a time. And as the city buzzed with the downfall of false gods, a new, quiet legend was being written in a warehouse on the edge of town, where the books were always balanced, and the heart had finally found its rightful place in the equation. Ledger stood in the doorway, watching her. Sunlight streamed through the high warehouse windows, catching the determined furrow in Alina's brow as she cross-referenced the brewery manifest with the digital invoices. She'd been at it for hours, a testament to a focus he recognized in himself. It was more than just doing a job. It was the quiet fury of someone proving they belonged, that they were more than the world had told them they were. He walked over, the soft sound of his boots on concrete the only announcement. "You found the discrepancy." She didn't jump. She was already attuned to his presence, a fact that sent a quiet thrill through him. 3 pallets of imported hops billed but not received. The shipping code matches a delivery to a different warehouse across town, a competitor's warehouse. "Good," he said, his voice a low rumble of approval. "What's the move?" She looked up, her eyes, which yesterday had been pools of shock and fear, now sharp with intellect and a hint of steel. Confront the supplier with the evidence, demand a credit for the missing shipment and a 10% discount on the next order for breach of contract. If they balk, we switch suppliers. We have 3 other bids waiting, all within 5% of their price. Loyalty doesn't trump integrity. A genuine, full smile broke across Ledger's face, transforming his usually solemn features. It was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. "Perfect. You just saved the brewery $12,000. A blush tinged her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "It's just numbers." "No," he said softly, leaning a hip against the desk. "It's the story the numbers tell, and you read it perfectly." He reached out, his fingers briefly, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead. The touch was fleeting, but the heat of it lingered in the air between them. "I have to go to the firm for a few hours. Paperwork for the St. Clair situation. Marcus is around if you need anything." She nodded, a flicker of something, concern, possessiveness, in her eyes. "Will they come after you, the St. Clairs?" Ledger's smile turned cold for a moment. "Their lawyers are currently fighting a 7-front war with federal agencies. They're selling jewelry on eBay to pay for groceries. The empire has not just fallen, it's been paved over." The coldness melted as he looked at her. "You're safe. That's a permanent state now." He left her with that promise, and the warehouse felt different as he rode away. Lighter. It had been a fortress of calculation and control. Now it felt like it had a heart beating inside its steel ribs. The day at Aldrin and Stern was a predictable circus of quiet panic and fervent back-covering. Ledger navigated it with his usual detached precision, the perfect, unflappable employee. But his mind was across town, in a sunlit warehouse. He found himself checking his phone not for market alerts, but for a message from her. There was none. She was working. The thought made him proud. He returned earlier than expected, a rare impulse driving him. As the warehouse door clattered up, he heard music. Not the classic rock or metal that usually echoed here, but something soulful, a bluesy ballad from an old vinyl record Marcus was fond of, and he heard laughter. In the open space near the kitchenette, Alina was dancing with Paul, one of the younger serpents, a giant of a man with a mechanic's hands and a teddy bear's heart. Paul was shuffling clumsily, his face red with embarrassed delight as Alina tried to teach him a basic step, her hands on his massive shoulders, patiently guiding. No, it's a 1-2 then a slide," she was saying, laughing. "You're doing a 1-2 and then a stomp. You're stomping the grapes, Paul, not dancing." Paul caught sight of Ledger and froze, looking like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Boss, she was just showing me." Ledger held up a hand, the warmth in his chest spreading. "At ease, Paul. It's called rhythm. I hear it's useful." He walked over, his eyes on Alina. She was glowing, the weight of yesterday completely gone, replaced by a vibrant, playful light. "Having fun with my compliance officer." "She's a tough teacher," Paul grumbled, but he was grinning. "The best ones are," Ledger said, his gaze never leaving hers. The charged space between them pulsed, even with Paul standing there. The music swelled, a slow, aching crescendo. "Well, I gotta go talk something," Paul announced, beating a hasty retreat, his boots echoing. They were alone, the blues singer crooning about second chances. Ledger didn't speak. He simply extended his hand, palm up, an unspoken question. Alina looked at his hand, then into his eyes. Without a word, she placed her hand in his. The connection was a jolt, a completion of a circuit that had been live since he'd helped her from that booth. He pulled her gently into him, not into Paul's comedic shuffle, but into a proper, close hold. One hand enveloped hers, the other settled firmly, possessively, on the small of her back. They began to move, a slow, swaying circle on the polished concrete. It was a dance, but it was more. It was a conversation. Her body melted against his, a perfect fit. She rested her head on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. He could feel the steady beat of her heart through their clothes. "I quit the diner today," she murmured into his neck. "Called Mick. He said he'd have my final check framed." Ledger chuckled, the vibration rumbling through her. "He's a good man." "I also found 2 more irregularities in the auto shop's parts inventory," she said, a note of pride in her voice. "I know," he said softly. "I saw the flags you raised in the system. You're a natural hunter." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. The playful light was still there, but beneath it was something deeper, more vulnerable. Why me, Daniel? You could have anyone, a lawyer, an MBA." He stopped swaying, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. His gray eyes were stormy with emotion. "Because when they hurt you, I felt it. Here." He took her hand and pressed it flat against his chest, over his heart. It beat a strong, rapid rhythm under her palm. "I have built walls around this thing for 20 years. Towers of numbers, moats of logic. You walked through them like they were nothing. You didn't see the accountant or the other thing. You saw the man who helped you up. And that man," he leaned closer, his breath mingling with hers, "that man hasn't been able to think of anything but you since." The confession hung in the air, more intimate than any kiss. The chemistry was a palpable heat, an 18+ tension woven from raw honesty and fierce protectiveness. It was a promise of passion, but one shrouded in a reverence that made it infinitely sweeter. "I'm scared," she whispered, her honesty mirroring his. "Of me." "Of this," she said, her gaze flicking between his eyes. "It feels too big, too fast, like a story that shouldn't be mine." "It's yours," he vowed, his voice absolute. "We write it at our own pace, one day at a time, one balanced ledger at a time." He finally closed the infinitesimal distance, his lips meeting hers. It was not a kiss of frantic passion, but of profound claiming and tender offering. It was soft, searching, a sealing of a pact. It tasted of coffee and hope and a future rewritten. When they finally parted, both were breathless, forever altered. The world outside continued to turn. The St. Clair scandal raged, then faded to a tabloid footnote. The Iron Serpents, legitimate businesses, flourished, their reputation for fierce but fair dealings growing. And in the warehouse, a new rhythm established itself. Weeks later, Ledger came home, and it was a home now, the apartment above the warehouse transformed with her touches, a bright rug, books on a shelf. The smell of something other than concrete and male solitude, to find Elena not at the desk, but at a drafting table he'd had installed for her. She was sketching, not spreadsheets, but elegant, architectural designs. "What's this?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, nuzzling her hair. "The new microbrewery tasting room," she said, leaning back into him with a contented sigh. "Marcus said if I found the savings, I could design the expansion. It's going to have a glass wall looking into the brewing vats and a living wall of herbs." He listened, his heart so full he thought it might stop. She wasn't just finding problems, she was building solutions. She was weaving herself into the very fabric of their world, making it brighter, better. That night, under sky peppered with stars visible through their large window, they lay entwined in his bed, now their bed. The charged moments had evolved into a deep, burning intimacy that was both thrilling and profoundly safe. He traced the lines of her back, the memory of the red mark on her wrist, now replaced by the memory of his own lips there and everywhere else. "I love you, Elena," he said into the darkness. The words, once foreign to him, now felt as natural and essential as breathing. She turned in his arms, her eyes shining with unshed tears in the moonlight. "I love you, Daniel Ledger, my avenging accountant, my quiet biker, my balance." The sweetness of the ending wasn't in a grand gesture or a fairy tale finale. It was in the quiet, daily victory. It was in Marcus calling her, the brains of the operation, with gruff affection. It was in Paul successfully executing a waltz at the brewery's grand opening, beaming at Alina like she'd given him the secret to fire. It was in Ledger coming home to a kiss that held the heat of shared secrets and the comfort of shared dreams. One evening, a year later, they stood on a rooftop terrace of a new, sleek building, the official headquarters of Serpent Holdings. Below, the city glittered, a kingdom they protected in their own way. Alina wore a simple black dress, a far cry from her diner uniform, a platinum serpent pendant, his gift, resting at her throat. Ledger stood behind her, his arms around her waist, his chin on her head. "We're a long way from Mick's griddle," she said softly, leaning back into his solid strength. He turned her in his arms, his eyes serious. "No, we're not. The principle is the same." He nodded towards the glittering skyline. "Out there are 1,000 David and Jessica St. Clairs, and there are 1,000 Alinas just trying to get through their shift." He kissed her forehead, a gesture of infinite tenderness. "We built this to be a fortress for the Alinas, to give them a place where the scales are always balanced." He took her hand, the one that had been slammed on the table a lifetime ago, and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles, then her palm, then the inside of her wrist, where her pulse beat a steady, strong rhythm against his mouth. "My love," he whispered, "my greatest audit, my forever investment." And as the city lights twinkled like a field of captured stars, Alina knew the sweetest ending wasn't an ending at all. It was a beautiful, powerful, and loving beginning, written in clean ledgers, ridden on rumbling engines, and built on the unshakable foundation of a justice that began and would always end with the heart. Thank you for watching. Was Ledger right to destroy their lives for justice, or did he go too far? What would you have done? Subscribe and comment balance if you believe in poetic justice, and tell me what city you're watching from.